Yeah, so I plotted out the route using the National Cycle Network. I just plotted it all out on Komoot, and it was it was just under 2,000 kilometers. So I was like, okay, it will be around 2,000 kilometers. I mean, I sort of knew I would have to be going away from the route a bit to find campsites and farms, but I obviously massively underestimated how much that would be the case. It was like, yeah, 3,240 ish kilometers in the end.
Welcome to Seek Travel Ride, where we share the stories and experiences of people taking amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello everyone, it's Bella Malloy here, host of Seek Travel Ride, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Now today I'm thrilled to be joined by Veronica White, who this year decided to undertake her PhD research in the form of a bike adventure. How awesome is that? Veronica named it the Farming Futures Cycle Tour, and she set off in April from Land's End and rode across England, 12 weeks later finishing up at the Scottish borders. Her PhD is centred around the vision for future food production, and along the way, Veronica met and spoke with women farmers as a way of conducting her research. Hearing firsthand from those in the industry about their visions for the future of farming and food systems. Along the way, she was also raising funds for the Farming Community Network, which is a vital charity offering confidential support to UK farm families. And what I really loved about Veronica's bike adventure was that she found her way to combine this academic research with a passion for experiencing the outdoors in such a sustainable way. I'm keen to learn how it all went for her, what it's like mixing research with pedaling, and also what she took away from cycling all over England's varied farmed landscapes. Veronica White, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, I'm super stoked to be speaking with you, Veronica. I sort of tracked your journey along on social media as it was happening, and it's not actually that long finished, is it?
No, so I just finished about a month ago, and I'm back down in Exeter now, kind of beginning the process of starting to do all the data analysis and reflecting on the trip as a whole.
Oh, wow. I just love the idea that you've been able to mix a bike adventure in with PhD research. And Veronica, I can't wait to get into the details of it. And I have a long list of questions to ask you. But Veronica, the first question I have, and I ask it to all my guests, is, Veronica White, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
Yes, I do. It was a Little Mermaid bike, and it had tassels on the handlebars. And to be honest, I feel like more bikes should have tassels on the handlebars because that was really fun. So I grew up in the Netherlands. Well, so I was born in the US and then we moved to the Netherlands when I was 8. And growing up in North Carolina with, knowing we were about to move to the Netherlands, my parents were like, Veronica, you need to learn how to ride a bike. You can't move to the Netherlands and not know how to ride a bike. And so I remember going out to like the high school near where we lived so I could ride on the big fields, like the flat fields, and just not really getting on with the bike. I really struggled to move from a bike with training wheels to my proper first bike. And when Hurricane Katrina hit, my family was meant to be going camping in the mountains, but because gas prices obviously went up loads, we decided we were going to do our first bikepacking trip. But I couldn't ride a bike at this point. So
hang on. As a family, you were bikepacking. Oh my gosh, this is brilliant. Sorry, keep going.
Our camping trip, just in like a local park near our house or local forest. But when we set off, yeah, I couldn't actually ride the bike. So
this is called prime optimism from your parents here. I love it.
Exactly. It was like, you're going to learn in this weekend how to stay upright on the bike. And the only thing I really remember about that trip was at one point I needed to be able to change the gears, but I didn't know how to do that. And we ended up like walking with this couple, and my dad obviously had his bike with my sister on the back, so he couldn't do it. But this fully grown man that we were walking with got on my Little Mermaid bike and change the gears for me. And so I remember that. And then once that had been done, I think maybe it was a little bit easier for me to actually to ride. And yeah, by the end of that weekend, I could ride the bike. So that was kind of, you know, my first biking adventure was quite a big learning curve.
Oh gosh, was it what? Did the Little Mermaid bike make it to the Netherlands with the family move?
That's a great question. I can't remember. It might have done because that might have been what my sister rode, but I can't actually remember.
And then you would have, graduated to like a Dutch upright gazelle type bike for getting around, or
So I never actually had a proper Dutch Oma fiets. It was always more mountain bikey kind of gravel bikes as I was growing up.
did you ride bikes heaps in the Netherlands?
Oh yeah, yeah. So my family didn't own a car, so we basically got around by bike or by public transport. So from year seven, I was riding my bike every day to school, all the way up through middle and high school.
Yeah, and that's just part of normal day-to-day life.
Yeah, that's just so normal in the Netherlands. And the great thing about the Netherlands is like cycling is also a social activity. So you just go for rides and like chat with your friends. Whereas I feel like that can be more difficult here in the UK. I know there's obviously groups that do like big rides, but it's less about just like, we're going to go for a cycle and just chat, because quite often you can't even ride next to each other because the cycle paths are too narrow or you're up against cars. So that social element's a bit different. So yeah, cycling was just it was just a way of getting around and living life in the Netherlands. So yeah, take on a very different kind of role in the UK.
Did you find, because you grew up with that sort of culture, finding yourself in the UK, have elements of that stuck with you, or do you consciously realize that's missing? Like when you moved, did you realize, oh gosh, I can't do this anymore, and or have you somehow managed to keep cycle commuting and everything like that?
Yeah, so cycling was definitely a lot less part of my life when I moved to the UK. So I did my undergraduate degree in Norwich at the University of East Anglia, and I brought my bike over from the Netherlands with me, and I really wanted it to be a part of like my everyday life. I even I was living on campus at UEA, and in the first week I was cycling to lectures, which was probably about a 5-minute walk, just because that was what I was used to doing, was like cycling everywhere. And I very quickly realized actually it was taking me longer to unlock my bike, cycle the like 2 minutes, lock up my bike, and then walk to my lecture. So that stopped pretty quickly. And so basically, I was just using the bike to get out to some of the big supermarkets on the edge of town. And even that was like a stressful experience because, cycle paths would just dead end onto like major roads. And you'd have to try and find a way to cross, this traffic multiple lanes of traffic. So yeah, I quickly realized, even cities that claim to be cycle friendly here in the UK is not cycle friendly when you've come from the Netherlands.
I hold on to hope though, especially when you've seen what really good, or maybe I don't know that anything's perfect, but say for example, we'll just use that word. When you've seen perfect, when you're living in something that's now no longer that, you really notice just how starkly different it is and how much it could be better. And I sort of think we are moving towards that. And like the Netherlands, in the 70s, for example, wasn't how it is now. Like they made a conscious decision to change that way. And I sort of hold out hope that that will happen a little bit more as well. And I think I hold hope because the younger generation of people want it to happen a bit more. And I think statistically seeing things, like younger people are not getting their licenses as early as they used to. They're not driving as much as they used to, potentially because of cost of living pressures. And people want to have that, active travel sort of transport as a way. It's more sustainable. And so maybe with the influx of people, we'll see those changes happen too. That's my hope anyway, Veronica.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
It's one thing to cycle commute to do the shopping. What about cycling as a part of your holiday? Because before the PhD research, you did enjoy some sort of cycling as well in terms of active holiday as well, right?
Well, to be honest, the only time I'd done like a cycling holiday prior to coming up with the idea for the trip was in the Netherlands. Was a little bikepacking trip on the island of Texel. Texel. I don't actually know how you pronounce it, but I came up with the idea for the PhD in February 2024, and I knew I needed to do a lot of training because, yeah, as I said, I wasn't really doing a huge amount of cycling in the UK, and the cycling I was doing here, once I'd moved to Exeter, was mostly on the kind of ex-estuary trail, which is a protected cycle path. So I wasn't used to cycling on roads, I wasn't used to cycling on hills, and I knew if I was going to cycle across England, I needed to build confidence in both of those areas. And so, yeah, I did a 4-night trip down to Falmouth for my master's graduation.
I saw that. I thought that was brilliant, by the way. Like riding to your graduation on a bikepacking adventure was, I love that as a scheme too.
Yeah, no, it was great. And it was like a great kind of test run for me. So it was the first, yeah, kind of multi-day bikepacking trip that I'd done. It was my first time packing everything up onto the bike. And it was also my first time kind of doing a bit of media. So it was the first time I was interviewed on the radio. And it was really great to see, that had gotten so much kind of media excitement because I thought it was a good sign for the future trip. If me just cycling 4 days to my graduation was getting this much kind of attention, that hopefully the bigger trip would also get some kind of attention as well, and help me with recruitment and fundraising and all those kinds of things.
Can I take you back to like the first few hours of day one of that trip and ask you, what do you vividly remember?
Of the trip to Falmouth, or
Yeah, to cycling to your graduation.
yeah, so I was really nervous, like especially the night before. So we'd planned on doing it over 5 days, I think. But the weather on that first day was so bad, we decided, okay, we're just going to push it back a day. Like that, we'll still be able to make it. And I just remember feeling really scared. So yeah, Brett, my boyfriend, he was joining me as well, and I was just like, gosh, like what if one of us gets injured? Like I would hate to have brought him on this adventure and then to see him get injured by a car. I was just really, really nervous about riding on roads, essentially. But then as soon as we got started, I was like having so much fun and just so excited. And a lot of the fear kind of, I don't want to say it disappeared, but it wasn't at the forefront of my mind as much as it was in the lead up to the trip.
Often, like when you actually are doing the actual thing, all the stuff that we catastrophize or worry about, they don't materialize and they get overtaken by these other thoughts of, wow, what a way to see the place, right?
Yeah, and it was great. And there were a couple times on that first day where we were on roads. So we were following the National Cycle Network, but there was even points on the NCN where I thought, you know what, I'm not actually enjoying this road. It's too big, it's too fast. And so we'd sort of pull off, use Komoot and use Google Maps and like reroute. And so we ended up going on these like tiny little country lanes that were really hilly. We ended up at Fingal Bridge, which is on the edge of Dartmoor, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And we had a Sunday roast there. So, it's one of those things like if we hadn't rerouted, we never would have ended up there. And that ended up being one of our favorite parts of the trip.
I love it. Can you remember what you had for Sunday roast? Sorry, I have to talk about food at some stage. You brought it up naturally. Like,
Yeah, so it
what
was
was roast of the day?
it was a carvery, so it had a little bit of everything.
Being in the UK, it would have had like Yorkshire pudding as well.
Yeah, so Yorkshire pudding. I would have had some sort of like nut roast or some veggie roast, roast potatoes, carrots, all the good stuff. Lovely pub because it's right on the river, and it was one of the few times on that trip where it was actually sunny out.
So you had all the weather otherwise.
Yeah, it was just quite grey. Last summer was pretty miserable here in the UK. We sort of expected that we'd be stopping each night for Pimm's, and actually we ended up drinking hot chocolate instead, and because it was so cold.
See, that's the important thing that you learn on a bike adventure is sometimes when reality hits, you just have to pivot and remeasure your expectations and change and go with it. Like, okay, is it going to be Pimm's and lemonade? No, it's not. It's going to be hot chocolate and marshmallows. And you know what? That's not a bad thing either, right?
No, it was still lovely.
Did you gain a lot of confidence having completed that bikepacking tour to your graduation?
Yeah, definitely. It was very much like, okay, if I can do this, then, the trip next year is definitely a possibility because, I'd come up with this crazy idea to cycle across England and had no idea if I could physically achieve that. But the cycle ride from Exeter to Falmouth, I knew that was going to be kind of an example of how I could deal with the hills, which is obviously one of the big challenges. I was like, if I can do, Devon and Cornwall without having done a year's worth of training, next year I'll be fine. It was really a confidence boost that I could achieve it if I, set my mind to it.
Yeah. So you mentioned there about doing Devon and Cornwall, and then you also mentioned knowing that this is how you wanted to do your PhD. You'd have a year before you embarked on that adventure. Do you think, in hindsight, you could have done the PhD thing without a year's training? Like, do you think you could have just ridden yourself into the ride?
Potentially, I think I built up a lot of confidence
Mm.
in things like route planning and knowing how to find roads that I'd feel comfortable on. Also, like in the kind of couple, maybe 1 or 2 months leading up to setting off in April, I did quite a few little, just one or two night bikepacking trips around here in Devon. And that was really helping me work out packing strategies, getting used to my new bike. So the bike that I did my Falmouth or the Exeter to Falmouth ride on, that was like a bike I'd got for like £100 secondhand. It was not, I knew it was not suitable for doing the whole trip. So yeah, having the opportunity to get used to my new bike, really learn what I was packing, that I think was really valuable. And also just building up the physical strength to kind of cope with long days in the saddle, confidence to camp by myself and all those things. I think I probably could have done it last year, but I don't think it would have been as successful.
Or maybe the learning curve would have been a lot steeper and you would have
Yeah.
had some tougher moments that you would have just had to grin and bear through and somehow get by, right? Because I think that's the other thing. Like, you would have still had moments on this adventure that you had to figure out stuff and get by on too. I think, though, what you did arm yourself up with was just that mental self-assuredness of I can do this, and just even the logical way that you're saying, I let myself figure out how to plan routes. You obviously quickly learnt the type of roads you want to be riding on, the type of roads you want to avoid,
Mhm.
even giving yourself the confidence that, yeah, I can do a hilly route today. Like, there's so much that comes with confidence, doesn't there?
Yeah, but I also want to say, like, I was feeling very scared before the big trip as well. And to be honest, it wasn't right in before the big trip, but sort of around Christmas time, January, I was really scared. I was like crying myself to sleep at points because I was so scared about the trip. I was really worried about, yeah, getting hit by a car or, yeah, I mean, that was basically the main fear. And I think that could have just been my own fault based on who I was like following on Blue Sky at the point. A lot of like cycling activists, but then people who post things like people getting hit by cars while they're cycling. And I think probably seeing that stuff was just really getting to me. I was still really scared, even after all this, going through all of this effort of building up the confidence of being on the road. I mean, you never know here, like what could happen.
Did you have any like close past incidences or near misses or anything from that perspective on your journey?
Yeah, I would say there was nothing like too terrifying. Like there was no points where I was like, "Oh my god, that could have killed me." But I mean, there's a lot of drivers who make stupid choices and like I had a lorry overtaking me around a blind corner or like approaching a blind corner. I was like, "Why are you doing this?" Like I had times where people oncoming traffic had to stop or slow down because someone was trying to overtake me in a ridiculous spot.
Doesn't take much to think, gosh, that could have been an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
There's an element where I also feel like there's a level of patience that people just, for some reason, don't have. Like, if they're stuck behind, say, a tractor, they'll be stuck behind it for much longer, but maybe they'll be frustrated, but they seem to be a bit more patient about where they'll overtake. But if they're stuck behind a person on a bike, all of a sudden it's like, I need to pass you straight away.
Mm.
And I think there's also an element of there's a lot of people that don't realize how fast someone on a bike can actually travel too. So the amount of times, if I reflect in Australia, of being overtaken by a vehicle, and then that vehicle literally in 40 meters is going to turn off and come to a stop and turn, and you just sort of think, well, why didn't you just wait till I rode past that? But I don't think they realize how fast you move sometimes.
Yeah.
Listeners, I want to talk about sunglasses, and I want to give a huge shout out to Ombras. Specifically, I've been rocking the Refugio Sunnies, and these things have honestly been a revelation for me. Now, I don't know about you, but I have had the heartbreak of breaking much loved sunglasses before. My favourite pair snapped, and seriously, I tried everything to fix them. I even had a friend try and like reintegrate the arm for me. I tried to go back to the original supplier and it was a discontinued model and I had absolutely no luck. Anyway, I have recently switched to Ombras and here's the clever part. They actually don't have side arms. Instead, they use this lightweight cord system which sits comfortably around your head and they stay perfectly in place. Seriously, they do not slip, they do not roll down your nose when you're riding and your nose is sweaty or you're heading down a descent. You don't have to continually move them around and shift them. And the other thing is they have no arms to break in the first place and they don't get tangled in your hair. That was an unexpected great thing. And trust me, if you've seen a photo of me, you know that I've got some pretty wild curly locks and not having sunglasses get tangled in there is a great thing as well. But here's the real kicker. For every pair that they make, Ombras plant 20 mangrove trees. So they're producing stuff which is brilliant for your bike adventures while at the same time being absolutely awesome for our planet as well. If you want to check them out and support the podcast, head to the affiliate link which I have put in the show notes. Honestly, once you try Ombras, you're not going to go back to your conventional sunnies.
So yeah, but other than that, it wasn't too bad.
What about camping? Because you were camping at campgrounds, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
And what was that like? Because I know you mentioned your partner, Brett, and I think he joined you for a section of your journey at the end of it. But what about doing the trip solo and stuff like that? Did you have any concerns about that or not at all?
Yeah, it wasn't something I was too concerned about in terms of camping. The thing I was most concerned about with campsites was that the bike would be stolen. And again, this is like hearing stories online and on Facebook of people going on tours and getting their bike nicked while they're camping. But actually, to be honest, most of the campsites I were at were so quiet that very quickly that fear kind of was not an issue.
Yeah. What was your strategy for that anyway? Like, did you take a lock with you and lock your bike at night?
Yeah, so I had like a D lock with me for when I was out, but at most campsites I just had an alarmed wire lock that I just put around the tire. And yeah, even that like probably wasn't really necessary in most of the campsites I was at. But, obviously once you start getting to some of the bigger ones, then at the busy ones I would occasionally like, put a tent peg in through or a guy line through the tire or through the wheel. But yeah, that wasn't something I was that worried about actually once I was on the road. When I was at stores, that's very different. I was always worried my bike was going to get stolen.
Yeah, and that's a really tricky one when you're cycling on your own as well. Like if you're cycling as a team of two, someone can wait with the bikes and someone can go in and do the shopping.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when you're on your own solo and being in that area, did you find, I mean, it's tricky with your route. Like sometimes you can't choose where you're going to shop because it's the only place. But did you find where there were choices you were looking at smaller areas or what was your strategy there?
Yeah, 100%. Like I was really avoiding stopping in cities or anything like that, just because I was so nervous about the bike getting taken. So most of the time I would just stop in like tiny little villages. And in a lot of those places, I would just leave the bike unlocked outside because I was like, I'm not worried here. But actually finding food was one of the things that I found really hard on the trip.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh, which is amazing when we talk about what your research was about, which is
Exactly.
about
Yeah.
farm and food production, right?
Yeah, it's like I'm cycling through, the fens, like the heartland of food production in England, and I can find nowhere to get food. And I think one of the reasons why is that in a lot of these rural areas, a lot of the infrastructure is clustered around the big roads. And obviously I'm avoiding the big roads like as far as I can. And there's just very little kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There was one day where I had like vanilla pudding as like a dessert, that I had these little pouches and I hadn't managed to find anything for breakfast and I'd already cycled like 20 kilometers and I thought I really need to eat something. And so I just had to eat vanilla pudding for breakfast.
The worst thing in the world.
Okay. But, like I'd really just thought, oh, I'm in like a national park. Surely there's going to be a little shop somewhere where I can just pick up something to eat. Nothing.
Did that happen early on in your tour or?
No, so early on was a bit better. I feel like in Devon and Cornwall, there was more kind of small farm shops and places like that. It was more once I got out east and up north that I found it more challenging.
And so then did you find that you were carrying more food on you after the vanilla pudding for breakfast incident? Like did you have like a this is my emergency breakfast?
No, I probably should have done that. I didn't really have that much space to carry like 2 bags of cereal.
When you do your second thesis on a bike, this will be something else there as well. We should actually let's take a chance to tell the listeners properly about like how you even schemed this idea to do this on a bike. Like, what is your PhD about, and give the listeners an overview of your bike adventure encompassing that research as well.
Yeah, sure. So my PhD is in human geography, and I'm looking at visions for the future of farming. So that includes, physical representations like photographs or drawings of what the future could look like, but it also includes how we imagine what the future looks like. So the mental images of the future. And I knew that I wanted to speak to people involved in farming to find out how they imagine what the future might look like. And I knew I wanted to kind of visit different parts of England because farming is so diverse in different parts of the country. But I never learned how to drive. As I said, I grew up in the Netherlands. We didn't have a car. It never made sense to do driving lessons. I still don't know how to drive. And rural kind of public transport isn't necessarily the most reliable here in the UK. So the idea came that I should just cycle across the country to meet people in different rural communities and explore their visions for the future of farming. And when I first came up with the idea, the plan was to do Land's End to John O'Groats. Obviously, that's a very well-known route here in the UK. And sort of, it wouldn't have been a direct route. I still would have gone out east to kind of get the big arable farms, but was going to do data collection in England and Scotland. And when I presented that to my research group, they were like, well, if you're going to visit England and Scotland, you should probably also visit Wales and Northern Ireland. And I thought, you know what? I think this is getting out of hand. That's too much cycling. So I decided to just focus on England and just do my data collection in England. And I decided to focus on women in farming communities because a lot of the research that's been done in this area historically has been with kind of male participants, usually in industry, academia, or government. And so I really wanted to like speak to people whose voices maybe haven't been heard as regularly. And what was great about kind of focusing on women is that also really aligned with me as a woman kind of stepping into field work and long distance cycling and photography, like these fields that have historically been and in many cases still remain very male dominated. So I was sort of hoping that my journey could have some parallels potentially with the women who I was meeting along the way. And one of the things I enjoyed about that, and I think was successful about kind of deciding to work with women in farming, is a lot of them haven't participated in kind of research, academic research like this before, which shows that this kind of creative and exciting way of doing fieldwork potentially reached participants who wouldn't normally agree to participate in research, which I think is really exciting. So yeah, I ended up cycling over 2,000 miles across England. So I started, as you said, down in Cornwall, went up through Devon and Dorset, and then over to London, where I did some data collection as well, because I wanted to learn more about urban kind of growing as well. From there, I went through Essex, Suffolk, and Norfolk to the Fens, and then up the East Coast through Lincolnshire and North Yorkshire, and then over to Cumbria, where I finished on the Scottish border. And I managed to interview around 50 women in farming, which I'm really pleased with, and got to hear about a range of different farming types, a range of farm sizes. So, from something that's under an acre, little tiny market garden, all the way up to huge arable and horticulture farms. So it was really cool getting to see just the massive diversity in farming types, in farming landscapes, and yeah, just the diversity of how people get into farming. Yeah, so that's kind of a little overview.
How did you figure out who to interview? Like, I'm guessing, like, did you have interviews sort of like a schedule set up before you set off? Were you figuring these during your tour? Were you literally riding to a farm gate and going, oh, I'm going to speak to this person? Like, how did you actually come up with who to interview? Because Like, does that come into how you planned your route as well?
So I didn't really do any recruitment until a week before I started my trip. And that was because it took me a while to get my kind of ethics application approved at the university, and I wasn't allowed to recruit until that had obviously gone through. That was approved, yeah, as I said, like a week before I set off. I started putting out recruitment materials, got some interest through that, but a lot of it was actually done as I was on the road, sort of posting things in Facebook groups in, the areas that I was in, reaching out to people on Instagram or on Facebook, and in some cases just ringing up farms. So when I'd come up with this idea, I had thought that I would just show up to farms and try and chat to people that way, because there's some evidence to suggest it's getting more difficult to recruit farmers for research because they're quite an oversampled population, because everyone wants to do research with farmers. Some researchers have found actually just showing up at the farm gate is a successful way of recruiting people. And so, yeah, when I was coming up with the project, that was something I was sort of assuming I would do, but actually that's quite nerve wracking. And it's hard when you show up to a farm to know who to speak to or to even find anyone to speak to. So in the end, I didn't actually do any of that. It was all prearranged, but prearranged could have meant I rung them up an hour ago, but they always knew I was coming.
Yeah, and by the sounds of it, you did a lot of interviews. Put my hand up as someone who knows what it's like to conduct an interview. And there's stuff that goes into it as well. So well done.
Thank you.
Did you ever go across a section where you weren't able to interview someone? Like, is there an area that you go, gosh, I really wish I had someone that I could have spoken to in this area? Or were you able to sort of, like, when you look back at your route of England, do you feel like your research has canvassed what you wanted it to?
Yeah, so interestingly, like when I set off, the plan was basically to cycle for a week and then stop for a week and do data collection in that area, and then to do that up the country. But as I started the trip, I'd get people would get in touch with me and they'd be like near my cycling route, but not necessarily near where I was going to be doing data collection. But it just felt really hard to say no to people if they wanted to be involved. And so the kind of distinction between cycling weeks and data collection weeks blurred a lot. But yeah, so there are areas where I didn't do any data collection, and there's other areas where I had loads of interviews. So it was a bit varied. There was one farm in Lincolnshire that I really wanted to visit, but I actually, as I was trying to plot a route, I realized there was literally no way for me to get there that didn't involve like multiple kilometers on A roads.
Yuck.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I would have zero appetite for riding on an A road in the UK.
Yeah, no,
Give
exactly.
me a quiet country lane with a really punchy climb at either end of it any day of the week.
Yeah, exactly. And so I literally just had to email her and be like, I'm sorry, like there's no safe way for me to get there. So yeah, it's just interesting to think about those kinds of things as well, and think how cycling can be, obviously open up a lot of interesting places to see, but in certain cases we're actually limited based,
On the infrastructure, yeah.
yeah, how our society is so like car dominated, and our infrastructure is built to support that and not to support us as cyclists.
It's just not pleasant to ride with a lot of cars. And like you said, you found it limiting in terms of, well, even if you wanted to go to this area, it wasn't somewhere that you'd want to go to on a bike.
Mm-hmm.
Something else actually that came up was when you originally plotted this route, you thought it would be about 2,000 kilometres and it ended up being about 2,000 miles, which is a significant difference.
Yeah.
I think, did it end up, I'm going to speak in kilometres because kilometres sounds better in distance. Was it like 3,200 odd kilometres? Like it's almost not quite double what you wanted, but it's like more than 50% more.
Yeah. Yeah. So I plotted out the route using the National Cycle Network. I just plotted it all out on Komoot, and it was it was just under 2,000 kilometers. So I was like, okay, it will be around 2,000 kilometers. And that was I sort of knew I would have to be going away from the route a bit to find campsites and farms, but I obviously massively underestimated how much that would be the case. It was like, yeah, 3,240-ish kilometers in the end. So, yeah.
I've noticed this before. Whenever I have ridden whenever I've actually planned out a route, and it's funny, listeners, I've sort of changed the way that I tour now, where I might have a start and a end of day destination in mind, but how I get there, sometimes I sort of just like to feel my way. Whereas, gosh, when I first started on this, every single meter of the route had to be planned out. But I definitely find, even if that is the case, you do have you end up riding further than what you think, because you double back, you go to find food somewhere. Well, oh, this place isn't open. Well, I must go into the city here or into the air. And even finding your accommodation for the night adds on stuff that you didn't think about. And if you're camping, maybe you get to your accommodation, you've pitched it, but then you realize, oh no, I actually need to go and buy dinner. And then so you've got all those extra, but 1,200 extra kilometers.
Yeah.
It's almost an extra 1,000 miles.
Yeah, an extra 800 miles or something.
Oh, be proud. It sounds more badass.
Definitely.
Oh, when you were planning out your route, you mentioned that you use software like Komoot. Were you getting a bit excited about what you were actually going to see? Because I feel like there's two elements to this adventure. There is the PhD research, the whole reason of the why, the bones of the trip. But then there's also the fact that, well, you are going to be riding and there is work involved, but it's also a way to see the country. Like, were you getting excited about what you were going to see? And were there places in particular that you couldn't wait to see?
Yeah, no, I was definitely really excited about, the adventure. And, I mentioned I had been really kind of fearful in kind of December, January, but then as we got closer to the trip, I was actually just really excited. That fear kind of went away a little bit, which was great. And I was excited to explore up north because I haven't really done a huge amount of traveling up there before. So I was excited to visit North Yorkshire and Cumbria as well. I'd had a lot of people tell me that Devon and Cornwall are actually like the most beautiful bits of of the ride, because I joke that I was really lucky that I was training down there because it meant I was already used to the hills and they didn't come as a surprise to me when I started the trip. And people would be like, "Oh yeah, this is actually this is the nicest part of the route." But actually, I really loved it up north. I really loved North Yorkshire, especially, and the Yorkshire Dales. And so yeah, I think that's what I was really looking forward to. I'm glad that it lived up to the kind of excitement.
Yeah, it's funny, when I was thinking about your project and your ride and your landscapes and linking it to farming and food production, something that really came to my mind was whenever I've had like an aerial view of the landscape, and whether that's from, flying a drone or whether it's from being in a plane and looking down, is that patchwork quilt of different crops and all of that sort of stuff. And so you were planning a ride that was moving yourself through that landscape. I guess
Mm.
visually, how do I want to word this? You're doing research on food production and farming practices. I guess there's elements where the landscape is changing, determining what sort of food production is taking place in those areas as well, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. And the farming landscapes I cycled through were so incredibly diverse, and are really, the crops that are grown there or the food that's produced there is very much reflected in the kind of landscape that you're traveling through.
I'm an Aussie, so I don't really know what sort of stuff's grown where in the UK. But so from where you started, Devon and Cornwall, what sort of food production are you talking about there as opposed to moving up into the Yorkshire Dales?
So yeah, I'd say a lot of the kind of more hillier areas, so places like Devon and Cornwall, but also the Dales and Cumbria, a lot there is more kind of beef and sheep production, whereas then out east is where it's much flatter. And it actually, when I was in the Fens, that really felt like being back in the Netherlands because it's just flat as a pancake. And out there is a lot more kind of large scale arable horticulture. So wheat, potatoes, all of that kind of larger scale production that you don't see as much of. I mean, it's still it is still here in like Devon and Cornwall and up north, but it's not as prevalent. And it was interesting actually, like when I was cycling through kind of the Fens and Essex as well, actually, just being like, where are the animals? There's so few like livestock animals. Whereas, when I'm doing training rides down here in Devon, you can't go 5 minutes without seeing a sheep or some cows. So that was just interesting, that kind of difference in the landscapes and the farming types in the different areas.
Did you see many tunnel houses or hot houses for production of food and stuff along your route as well? Like, is there agriculture on that sort of bigger scale taking place in the UK too?
Yeah, there definitely is some like greenhouses. I didn't see a huge amount of them. I saw some, but it's not like in the Netherlands where you just, are riding for ages and just surrounded by glass houses. So yeah, I think there are areas that have a lot more. Maybe I just didn't.
Maybe they're near the A roads.
Yeah, probably.
Something you mentioned earlier was, in Devon and in Cornwall and in the Dales, you're more seeing cattle and sheep, so more livestock in terms of food production. This was actually something that you had a little bit of, I guess, a feel for because you volunteered during lambing season at a farm, didn't you?
Yeah.
We have to talk about this. How did that come about and what was it like?
Yeah, so one of my really good friends that I actually met while doing my master's in Exeter, she's got a farm in near Ross-on-Wye. And I knew that if I was going to be doing research with farmers, it's good to have experience on farms just to be able to kind of have a bit more empathy for their experiences, but also to know a bit of the language. So this was actually the fourth farm that I volunteered on. And I just went for a week to go stay with Drita at Craddock Farm and helped with
How did you not
lambing.
come back with a little lamb, like a little pet?
I
Oh my
know. Oh my
gosh.
gosh, I would have. They were so sweet. They were so cute. So yeah, I had an amazing time. Drita and Alice were both like super, open, just telling me if I had any questions, they would just answer them, and they just, put me to work, and I had a great time. I think I really enjoyed it because I was just there doing, basically some physical labor, but I wasn't having to make any decisions, and I enjoyed that. I don't think I would enjoy actually being a farmer who has to decide, these lambs aren't doing well, or this ewe's not doing well, we have to take her lambs away, or having to make the decisions about feed or when the lambs are going to go out or which animals need medicine, all those kind. It's a hard job, and I was just there having a good time.
You're not making any decisions. You're there in the nice part.
Right.
There's emotional parts that aren't nice.
Yeah, definitely.
What about your experience? I want to talk about some of the research that you have undertaken and some of the people that you met there. Were there, and I imagine now that the cycling aspect of it and the tour part of it is complete, this is where you get into really digging into the research and the interviews that you conducted. But along the way, did you start noticing key themes sort of crop up? Dare I say it as a pun? But did you find that key themes kept rising, and did they stay the same, or did they change from region to region, or were they dependent on the type of farming taking place?
Yeah, so there were a few key themes that came up in a lot of the interviews, kind of irrespective of the farm type or where I was in the country. And those were things around education. So, farmers really wanting the public to be a lot more educated about what goes on farms, having a better understanding of the amount of hard work that it takes to be a farmer, and kind of building off that educational aspect, just there being a lot more respect for British farmers, the public choosing to buy British products, choosing to support British farmers, and the government actually having more respect and more understanding for what farmers do as well. As a result, kind of trying to move towards a policy of more kind of national food self-sufficiency, so reducing reliance on imports, actually just really valuing the food that's being produced here. And then another kind of theme that came up a lot was around farming with nature, so trying to find environmentally friendly ways of farming. And what was interesting about that, though, is that it really depends kind of on who you're speaking to as to what that means. So for certain farmers, like just, having hedges on the farm, that's enough to be kind of sustainable. Obviously, for other farmers, that's the bare minimum. So it's interesting sort of thinking.
Is that sort of looking into the biodiversity aspects of a farm as well?
Mhm.
Okay. And in terms of, from a farming practice point of view, is it also looking at it from a pesticide or pest control element too?
Yeah, and so one of the interesting things I'd ask sort of about technology and what technology they hope to see in the future. And something that came up a lot when I was kind of round the fens, where it's more arable farming, was a lot of people mentioned these new sprayers for like pesticides that I guess have cameras so they can actually detect where needs spraying instead of just spraying a whole field. It would just spot spray where it's needed. So there are ways, where technology potentially could help benefit the environment by, reducing the amount of pesticides that are being applied. But again, it's interesting thinking about the dynamic and the interplay between, yeah, nature and farming and technology and how these things all kind of fit together into the future and how different farmers have very different views on those kinds of interactions.
Did you have experiences with, say, farmers that are farming in a way that probably would have been the same, decades and decades ago, to farmers who have started using some different modern sort of ways for food production already? And did you have examples of, say, people doing it's been done like this forever, to people who are looking towards innovative ways of making food production easier, more sustainable, or more efficient, or using their land in different ways that way as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I spoke to a fell farmer in Cumbria. So she has sheep up on the fells, and I think the way she's farming is very traditional, very historic, and then yeah, out to these kind of big, very commercial farms out in the fens on doing arable and horticulture that are really thinking about the technology they can use to reduce need for labor or yeah, try and make things more environmentally sustainable. But yeah, it's just interesting to think about, both of those things and how they fit into a sustainable future for farming.
On one side, you sort of think, well, as humans, we innovate and we always look to improve. And so there will be more modern ways of doing stuff that could, provide a outcome that's better than the current way. But is there also in farming a case where actually are there people actually going the other way? Are there people that are looking at more traditional methods as a more sustainable way to farm as well?
Yeah, 100%. And that is something that came out a lot in my interviews. So the kind of the structure for the interview, as we were talking about the kind of the future, we'd also look at the past and present of farming as well. And so it was interesting to hear sort of some of the things from the past that farmers thought that we could learn as we kind of look towards the future. And a lot of the kind of visions for the future for many people, not for everyone, but for many people were around, smaller scale farms, family farms, less, less need for chemical inputs, things, that are now maybe named regenerative or agroecological, which historically that's just how things were done. And so there is definitely farmers and maybe a growing number of the farming community that are sort of looking back to the past and thinking, how can we, apply those practices and make them successul today?
As a consumer, you see those practices are a differentiator in terms of products that are available. Like, for example, whether you say you're at a supermarket, whether you're buying produce that's, you can buy these apples, or over in this section is the organic certified grown ones. And, one is more expensive than the other, but maybe one aligns more with less pesticides or different ways. So I guess that's a way that consumers potentially are going to be impacting the future of food production as well, in terms of what we're demanding to see at the stores.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, that is something that most of the participants wanted to see, was British consumers eating British food and demanding British food in the supermarkets, or just shopping locally at things like markets or direct from farmers and finding ways to support local producers.
Did you actually, anywhere on your trip, come across sort of like weekly farmers markets or anything like that?
So there were farmers or yeah, participants that I chatted to that definitely are participating in things like that. It is interesting, like having grown up in the Netherlands, where I feel like the food markets are such a kind of integral part of people's food shopping there. It doesn't really feel the same here. So I didn't really come across that many, but I also wasn't necessarily seeking them out.
When I think of my food experiences, say, between Australia and here, if I think of farmers markets in Australia, I don't necessarily want to say this out loud, but I will. The stereotype to me is sometimes it's a bit bougie. Like you sort of go to a farmer's market, you expect it to perhaps cost a little bit more, but you feel better for it because you're going straight to the source. It's farm gate to plate sort of
Mhm.
thing. Whereas here in France, it's definitely a culture of it's got nothing to do with that. It's just buying locally, and it's what you do. And so I think that's what your experience has potentially been with the Netherlands, and as averse to like England as well.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I don't have a very good answer for that.
I have to ask you this question: what's your vision for the future of food production? Listeners, I want to give a huge shout out to Zerali, who are supporting Seek Travel Ride. I'm honestly stoked to be working with them because they are an Aussie company doing outdoor gear right. Everything they make is designed by people who actually spend time adventuring outdoors, so they get what works and what doesn't. What I really love is how environmentally conscious they are as a company. They are designing products thinking about their environmental impact. They're using both sustainable and ethical materials to create gear that will last. I absolutely love their line of merino products. They're brilliant, lightweight, breathable. You wear it for days, you don't get smelly. And trust me, when you're out on the road or a trail for a few days at a time on a bike adventure, not feeling like you're smelly wearing the same t-shirt is a big plus. They don't just make clothing though, they also have tents, they have sleep mats, they make trail shoes, hats, everything. So if you are in the market for some of that outdoor type equipment, please hit up the affiliate link in the show notes. And another big monumental thank you to Zerali for supporting the show. Now, let's get back to the episode. What does it look like?
That's a great question. Um, I think it does have more kind of small scale but local fruit and veg production, and very kind of like the dream would be that each community has their own local, market garden that supplies that community. I've visited some incredible like small scale fruit and veg producers, so I'd love to see more of that for farming to be, a very respected career, a career that actually pays a living, because right now it doesn't. And just to see a lot more diversity in the landscapes across the country in terms of, not just having massive fields of arable production or just all livestock, but actually to have a much better mix, like sort of looking back to the past where there was a lot more mixed farming, integrating livestock within your arable rotations, and a lot more trees. I think we need a lot more trees, and especially in livestock kind of context, because, even just cycling, when I was getting 25, 30 degrees, it's really hot. And you're just, I was constantly seeking shade. I'm not ever going to stop just in the sun. And all the animals you see, all the
You
livestock you
see them
see
in
are
the
like
shade, in a wall or something.
trying up against a little stone wall, yeah, or just desperately trying to find shade. And so I think actually trees are going to end up being really important.
Al Humphreys talks about it a lot in terms of the UK and the deforestation that occurred over centuries there, and sort of shifting baseline syndrome, and talking
Yeah.
about the fact that we've normalized the fact that the landscape there doesn't have many trees.
Hmm.
And it's something that has struck me every time I've ever been there. Is I've often thought, where are the trees?
Yeah.
And it's normalizing that. And it's funny, like if I take this away from the UK and your project and cycling, and if I go back to Australia, where I was in Australia in Canberra city, and you see new subdivisions, and come summertime, they're all new, and there's new houses, and they're all concrete, and they're all bitumen roads, and there's trees that are planted that are tiny, and there's no shade. And the temperature in summer during a heat wave in those new suburbs compared to an older leafy suburb with lots of trees, it's so vastly different.
Hmm.
In a world where the climate is ever increasing and getting hotter and these extremes of temperatures, I agree with you. I think trees will become more important. It'd
Yeah.
be really great to see a return to many more tree plantations and things taken. Did you come across that, or did you come across sort of areas where there, or farmers even, who are looking at increasing the amount of trees and vegetation on their farms?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. There was definitely a few people I chatted to that completely recognized the importance of getting more trees on for protecting livestock, even protecting crops as well from wind or disease. I visited a really cool agroforestry project in Suffolk, where it's, arable crops are being planted in strips with trees kind of, yeah, breaking up each of the strips, which was really, really inspiring. So there are definitely people that are moving in a really positive direction in that way, I think. But yeah, the thing with trees is they take a while to grow, right? So
Yes.
if we want that shade in 20 years' time, we need to be planting the trees now.
Veronica, something that comes up when I interview people taking bike adventures is that one element that they really love is that all they have to think about all day when they're on a bike adventure is just riding their bike, where they're going to find food, where they're going to find water, where they're going to pitch their tent up for the night, or where they're going to sleep for the night. And what struck me is, because of your conducting research, did you ever get that freedom or that feeling as well? Or were you forever always having to think ahead to the next farm you've got to go to? Are you thinking, oh, I wonder how this interview is going to go? Like, did you have days where you could just focus on the act of pedaling through the landscape?
I'm not really sure I did, to be honest. I think because also my physical journey through the farmed landscapes was a part of the research as well. Basically, as I was traveling, I was having to like reflect on what it was like cycling through these landscapes, what I was seeing. So I was taking a lot of voice notes as I was riding. I was obviously taking photos and videos as well. And then, yeah, as you say, kind of thinking about planning for future interviews or kind of reflecting on interviews I'd already had. There was one day, so when I was in the Yorkshire Dales, basically I'd expected I was just going to cycle through. Like I hadn't planned on staying, but I fell in love with the landscape and decided I was going to spend an extra night. And so I had one day in the Yorkshire Dales where I basically could just leave all of my stuff at the campsite. So I got to cycle with a fairly empty bike, which is obviously very nice after you've been pedaling with all your gear.
It's also really weird and really twitchy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. um, but that day, I just got to like cycle for fun as opposed to like cycling from A to B or cycling to get to a farm. And that was one of my favorite days of the trip. It was amazing. It was so much fun. Just getting to like explore for the fun of it, as opposed to like, okay, I need to get to where I'm going next. So yeah, I think that was maybe one thing that I hadn't necessarily prepared for. Like I had built in a lot of time to rest, apparently, but what I hadn't really anticipated is that whenever I was off the bike, there was other things I would need to be doing. So whenever I was off the bike, I was planning my next interviews. I was looking up for where I was going to be camping the next day. I was planning my route. I was posting on social media. Like I didn't really have any time off, um, even when I was off the bike. So I mean, there was definitely times when I was on the bike that I was just like, oh, this is amazing. I'm having such a good time just like enjoying the landscape. But then at the back of my mind, it was always like, oh, we should be making notes about what the landscape looks like.
Yeah, it wasn't a holiday by any measure. Does it give you, missing out on that aspect of it, has it made you want to take, say, do some bike packing that's not research linked and for fun? Like, do you think this is the type, like, do you want to do another bike packing trip, for example? Would you do a multi-week bike packing trip that's got nothing to do with your PhD? It's going to be the way you do your holiday. Is that something that you would do?
Yeah, I would love to. My boyfriend and I are already planning, like, hopefully to do a big cycle tour in France at some point.
Oh, well, you had me at France.
Yeah. I have joked about doing the same tour in like the Netherlands because obviously farming in the Netherlands is very, very different in terms of like technology and scale and stuff like that. And then also we've joked about me doing one in New Zealand or Australia where again it's very different.
Oh my gosh, you'll be riding, like, there'll be days where you get to one farm and you'll be riding for the whole day and you'll still be on the same farm.
Yeah, so I guess it's quite a thing in the UK for young farmers to like go spend a season in New Zealand or Australia on farms out there
Mm,
and then
wow.
come back here. And anyways, one person I was chatting to, she said she was on a sheep farm, and she could have been exaggerating, but equally maybe not. She said it was the size of Wales.
Probably not exaggerating. Probably not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all sheep farms in Australia are the size of Wales, but there definitely are some that are, and certainly cattle properties and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Especially when you get out to the west or in the outback, and yes, they go for ages. That would be amazing to sort of be able to take your research internationally.
Yeah. So maybe maybe as a postdoc.
What is an aspect of your bike trip that you love the most?
I really loved getting to visit all these different farms and meet all these different farming women. And um, my recruitment wasn't necessarily just for women that identify as like the farmer, but could have also been the farmer's wife or the farmer's daughter, just any women who were living, working, or volunteering on farms. And so that was really cool as well, just to get to, speak to women who have very different roles, both on and off the farm, and get to see just the diversity of farms. No two farms are the same, even if it's the same production system. Every farm is different, and the family relationships that kind of underpin that farm are different. And I think maybe one of the reasons I really enjoyed the interviews a lot was that obviously I was spending most of my time on my own, and so actually getting to like just sit down at a farm kitchen table with a cup of tea and just have like these conversations with these women who are faced with like such incredible challenges and still manage to be resilient and be positive, I think is really inspiring. So I really enjoyed that. I also had some really lovely like warm shower hosts, and just experiences where I got to eat with other people, which sounds silly, but just shared meals became really important when I was eating most of my meals on my own. Yeah, I think those were probably some of the best bits.
Yeah, because Brett, your partner, joined you at some section. Did you feel like the trip changed a little bit for that time when he was with you?
Yeah, definitely. So he joined from London to Norwich. So as I said before, I did my undergraduate degree in Norwich, and he'd never had a chance to come visit Norwich before. So we thought that was a great opportunity for him to ride with me for a little bit, and then for me to get to show him around Norwich, show him where I used to live. He got to go see campus as well at UEA, which was really fun. But yeah, it was different just in terms of things like shopping. As we've already discussed, just having him to be able to stand out with the bikes meant I did actually shop at supermarkets, like bigger supermarkets, whereas I wouldn't do that normally, or we'd actually go into cities just to have a look. It was just nice having someone there to like eat meals with and to camp with and to share the experiences with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea that you're both scheming a bike trip together. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I can't wait to see that one play out. You're getting stuck into the research side of all the evidence that you've gathered now. I did see a quote from you somewhere which sort of quipped that the cycling was actually the easiest part of this PhD. Now the hard work begins.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be
The
the
mental
case.
burden has taken over.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
when is everything due in for you? Like when are you due to submit your thesis?
So about a year from now, probably. Although I'm hoping to get a couple extra months by doing like a work placement. So right now, the like rough date for submission is hopefully like January 2027.
And so, Veronica, if people want to keep updated with what you've done, see some visuals and find out more, what's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, so I'd say that Instagram and Facebook are kind of the best ways at the minute. That's where I'm posting kind of updates. So my Instagram handle is farmingfutures_cycle. Yeah, I post stuff on my stories there, post little videos and photos and stuff. I do have a blog as well, which is called Coves to Cliffs, but I don't really know what I'll be sharing on there. I've had like a bit of a challenge around what I'm sharing as a researcher versus what I'm sharing as a human and a cyclist. Yeah.
Cloves to Cliffs, where we'll be able to get insights from your French trip.
Yes. Yes.
There we go. I will provide links to both of those in the show notes, listeners, so you can keep an eye out for those as well. Oh my gosh, Veronica, it's time to wrap the show up. And I'm going to do it the same way I do with everyone. It's asking you the same 3 questions. First one's music related. You're a guest now of the pod, which means you get to choose a song that goes on the Seek Travel Ride playlist available on Apple and Spotify. What song, Veronica, are you choosing to be the soundtrack to your adventure?
So I knew this question was coming up, and it has been a bit of a conundrum for me because I'm a big musicals fan. So my bike is named Elfie after Elphaba from Wicked. I listened to a lot of musicals on the trip, just like when I was at campsites. I don't listen to anything while I'm riding because I'm too scared. I need to be able to like hear everything around me. But when I was at campsites, I'd be listening along to musicals. But the song that I've chosen is The Seed by Aurora, but specifically the one featuring Anna Lapwood that was recorded at the Royal Albert Hall. It's a fantastic song, and I did listen to it like basically on repeat um, for quite a while. As I was like basically packing up my campsite in the morning and stuff, I'd put it on and then just play it again and again. And I think the themes in that song, a lot of them are kind of reflected in my trip. So I think that's the song I'm going to have to go for, even though it's not from a musical, which does feel a little silly.
As a podcaster, it would be remiss of me not asking an open door question. What's your favourite musical?
No. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've been listening to a lot of Wicked, obviously, because the film came out last fall. And I've been listening to a lot of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which I saw, which was fantastic. I'm not saying those are my favorite musicals, but those are the ones that have been kind of on repeat recently. Yeah.
It's funny. I enjoy musicals, but it's not ever been like they're not something that I generally would choose. Like the songs from them aren't stuff that I would have on my playlist. Maybe I need to change that.
Yeah. What I enjoy about listening to musicals while I'm traveling, so not while I'm cycling, but in other times, is like I know, Hamilton's like 2 and a bit hours long. So if I listen to Hamilton, when that's finished, I know how long's passed, without having
Mm.
get quite good at knowing like, oh, okay, we're halfway through the musical. That means this much time has passed.
Or maybe you even plan a journey. Oh, I'm away for 2 hours, so this is the musical I'm going to listen to. There you
Well,
go.
yeah, when I did a half marathon, I was like, okay, well, it should take this amount of time. And I listened to Hamilton all the way through and finished around the end of Hamilton. So,
There you go. Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, gosh, you really know your musicals. All right, next question. You're given a choice one day. If you turn left, you're going to be riding constantly on the most corrugated, bumpy washboard road in the world. But if you turn right, you're going to be riding into a relentless headwind all day. Which one are you going to choose?
I think I'm going to choose the headwind. I did have quite a lot of headwinds on the trip. And to be honest, the headwinds are not as bad as the crosswinds. Those were definitely more scary.
Crosswinds are super scary.
Yeah. So I think I would choose the headwind.
As someone who grew up in the Netherlands, like you have an affinity with the wind as well, right? You're used to it.
Yeah, because it's like, you'd always joke, oh, we'll get a headwind on the way to school and a tailwind on the way back. But that's never how it was. It was always a headwind there and a headwind back.
Oh, where I am here, it definitely is the same. It's always a headwind up the valleys to climb the mountain, and then you turn around and you go, I've got the downward hill. But because of the temperature and the way that the air moves through the landscape, it means guaranteed as soon as you turn around, it's a headwind downhill through the valley as well. So it's just the way it works, isn't it? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and final question for you, Veronica. I want you to finish this sentence for me. And the question is, the best thing about taking a bike adventure is?
I'd say the best thing about taking a bike adventure is getting to really experience the landscapes that you're traveling through. So you're not just seeing them outside a car window, you're really feeling them with, your whole body, with all of your senses. And, that kind of slow way of traveling means you get to, I think, see and experience a lot more of the incredible places that you're traveling through.
And it sort of grounds you through the landscape, and you really get that feel that you have traveled through a landscape as well, that you have moved distinctly from one area to another, which I really love too.
Yeah.
You would have felt this so strongly because, Veronica, your whole adventure was traveling through landscapes. And I love that facet of it. Oh my gosh, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. And I really love the fact that you thought outside the box for a way to conduct your research. And that the catalyst for this was you knew you wanted to speak to people all over the country, but you don't drive a car, so you're going to have to ride there. I love that. I love that you also took the time to make the route something that would make that you would feel comfortable with, in that you weren't planning to be on busy A roads, that you wanted to plan a route that made you feel safe and enjoy the landscapes that you're going through rather than feel like you're fighting for your life there as well. And I especially love the bit that you just mentioned before about sharing meals with others and how important that became with you, or even having a cup of tea with a farmer and listening to their stories. It sounds like you've got so many insights to draw back on. And something that struck me, Veronica, as someone who edits interviews and puts out stuff like this for a living, whenever I listen back to it, it takes me right there. And you get to enjoy that now for the next year of your research, and it'll to give you reminders. And also that little nugget of spending the extra day in Yorkshire because you really love the landscape. And I wonder how many extra days you're going to spend somewhere in France next year with Brett when you're cycling because you really love the landscape too. All this to say, what an absolute pleasure it's been. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and experiences here on the podcast for Seek Travel Ride.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
There we go, listeners. Wow, what a unique way to conduct PhD research. And I love that Veronica's come away from it with a little bit of passion for future bike adventures as well. Something that I really loved hearing from Veronica was just how that year of prep before taking on this bigger research journey meant that she felt confident to take it on in the manner that she'd set it up for, and that she did set herself up for success. It's going to be interesting to see what her research comes up with. But I also feel that she's got such a stronger grounding now for the farming practices taking place in England and what she's observed. And something that Veronica said actually before we press record was how much she's noticed her own food buying practices have changed as a result of undertaking this tour, which is another signal that taking a bike adventure changes us and changes some of our practices in some way, shape, or form, whether it's how we choose to travel, where we choose to stay, or in the food that we choose to purchase from the farm gate or the supermarket. It was quite interesting to hear that aspect from Veronica as well. Something else that I found interesting was also just the diversity of farming practices that Veronica came across as well, and also the diverse practices where there's some people that are farming the way they've always farmed, but there's also others that are looking at different ways, and that also perhaps harnessing some modern technology actually will lead to not just more efficient practices, but perhaps better ecological practices as well. Thanks so much, Veronica, for sharing your insights. And listeners, if you're enjoying Seek Travel Ride and you want to support me and the podcast, you can do so by heading to buymeacoffee.com/Seek Travel Ride. Buy me some virtual coffees, but most importantly, let me know what is it that you love about the podcast and where's your next bike adventure taking you. And until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.